Hello everyone, and welcome back to Old Coins News. Today we're looking at some interesting United States Washington quarter dollars that could be worth more than their face value. We'll check their mint marks, condition, errors, varieties, and collector value, and show you exactly what to look for before spending one. So if you have any of these old quarters, don't spend them yet. Watch until the end, because you might have a valuable coin hiding in your collection. Let's the 1980p Washington quarter is one of the most interesting regular-issue Washington quarters of the modern era because the letter P on the coin identifies a Philadelphia mint, and 1980 was the first year that Philadelphia placed a P mint mark on Washington quarters. This makes the 1980p quarter historically significant even though it will produce in a very large quantity. According to PCGS and Graysheet, the 1980p Washington quarter had a mintage of 635,832,000 pieces, making it a common coin in ordinary circulated grades, but high-quality examples, impressive strikes, and certain unusual mint errors can be considerably more interesting to collectors. The coin has a face value of 25 cents, a diameter of approximately 24.30 millimeters, a weight of 5.67 grams, and a reeded edge. It is made from a copper-nickel outer layer over a pure copper center, with an overall composition of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. When you look at the obverse, or front, of the 1980p Washington quarter, the central figure is George Washington, the first president of the United States. Washington faces toward the left, and the portrait was based on the work of sculptor John Flanagan, whose Washington design had been used on the quarter since 1932. Above Washington's portrait is the word Liberty, while the national motto I in God We Trust appears to the left of his neck. The date 1980 appears at the bottom of the coin. On a genuine 1980p issue, the P mint mark is located near the lower right side of Washington's portrait, around the area close to the end of the hair or braid. The placement of the mint mark is an important feature when identifying the coin because the 1980 issue represents the beginning of the Philadelphia Mint's use of a P mark on Washington quarters. The reverse of the 1980p Washington quarter features a large heraldic eagle with its wings spread wide. The eagle holds a bundle of arrows in its talons, representing military readiness and national defense, while an olive branch appears beneath it as a traditional symbol of peace. Around the upper portion of the reverse are the words United States of America, followed by E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. The denomination quarter dollar appears at the bottom. This classic eagle reverse was used on Washington quarters after the bicentennial designs ended and continued through 1998, before the state quarters program introduced different reverse designs beginning in 1999. The year 1980 is particularly important for Washington quarter collectors because of the mint mark history. Before 1980, Philadelphia produced Washington quarters generally did not carry a mint mark. Beginning with the 1980 quarter production, Philadelphia used a P mint mark, meaning that collectors can immediately distinguish the 1980p quarter from the earlier Philadelphia issues. The 1980D quarter was made at Denver and carries a D mint mark, while the San Francisco Mint produced proof examples carrying an S mint mark. The Philadelphia Mint produced 635,832,000 regular 1980p quarters, while Denver produced 518,327,487 regular 1980D quarters. San Francisco produced approximately 3,554,806 proof quarters for that year. One of the most important things to understand about the 1980p quarter is that being old does not automatically make it rare. A coin from 1980 is now more than 4 decades old, but age alone does not create significant value. Millions of examples were made, and many survived because the quarter was a heavily used denomination. As a result, a normal circulated 1980p quarter is generally worth only around its face value or a small premium depending on condition and the market. Current price references show ordinary examples trading around modest amounts, while better preserved and professionally graded examples can bring substantially higher prices. New Mista's listed market figures also show the normal 1980p issue remaining relatively inexpensive in ordinary grades. The real opportunity for collectors comes from condition. Coin collectors use grading to describe how well a coin has survived. A circulated 1980p quarter may have scratches, contact marks, flattened details, discoloration, and wear on Washington's hair and cheek. An about uncirculated example may retain most of its original detail, but show slight friction on the highest points. An uncirculated coin, generally designated mint state or MS, has not experienced normal circulation wear. However, not every uncirculated coin is equally valuable. A coin can technically be uncirculated but still have many marks, weak details, poor luster, or an unattractive strike. Collectors therefore pay close attention to the difference between simply uncirculated and a truly exceptional high-grade specimen. The highest quality 1980p quarters are particularly interesting because modern clad coins can sometimes survive in impressive condition when they were removed from rolls or mint packaging before entering circulation. A coin with sharp details, strong luster, minimal contact marks, attractive surfaces, and an excellent strike can be considerably more desirable than an ordinary circulated example. PCGS records an auction record of $900 for a 1980p Washington quarter graded MS67+, sold through Heritage Auctions on June 19, 2019. This is an important point for anyone making a YouTube video about the coin. The spectacular price belongs to an exceptionally high-grade certified example, not to every 1980p quarter found in pocket change. Another useful reference is the gray sheet market information, which gives a broad value range for the 1980p quarter in mint state. Its displayed range extends from approximately 25 cents to $102, depending heavily on grade and market conditions. This demonstrates why condition is so important. A normal circulated coin might be worth very little above face value, while an unusually high-grade certified example can command a much larger premium. Collectors should therefore avoid assuming that a 1980p this copper. The 1981p Washington quarter is a regular-issue United States quarter-dollar coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1981. It belongs to the long-running Washington quarter series that began in 1932 and continued with a familiar Washington portrait and heraldic eagle design for many decades. The P mint mark identifies the Philadelphia Mint, making the 1981p especially easy to distinguish from the 1981D quarter struck at Denver. The coin has a face value of 25 cents, a diameter of approximately 24.3 millimeters, a standard weight of approximately 5.67 grams, and a reeded edge. Like other regular circulation Washington quarters produced after 1964, the 1981p is a copper-nickel-clad coin rather than a silver quarter. This means that although it is now more than 4 decades old, its ordinary value is not based on silver content. Instead, collectors are interested in its condition, quality, varieties, errors, and exceptional examples. The obverse of the 1981p Washington quarter features a portrait of George Washington, the first president of the United States. Washington faces left, with his hair tied behind his head in the traditional design created by sculptor John Flanagan. Above the portrait is the word Liberty, while the national motto I in God We Trust appears to the left of Washington's neck. The date 1981 is positioned at the bottom of the obverse. The small P mint mark appears on the obverse near the lower right portion of Washington's portrait. When examining a coin, it is important to identify this mint mark carefully because a 1981 quarter without a P is not the same issue as a Philadelphia minted 1981p. The mint mark is small, so good lighting and magnification can be helpful when checking an old coin. The reverse of the 1981p Washington quarter carries a traditional American eagle design. The eagle is shown with its wings extended, holding a bundle of arrows in its talons, while an olive branch appears below. Around the upper portion of the reverse are the words United States of America, and beneath them is a Latin motto E pluribus unum, which translates approximately to out of many, one. The denomination quarter dollar appears at the bottom. This reverse design is important because it represents the classic Washington quarter that millions of Americans use in everyday transactions before the introduction of the state quarters program in 1999. The year 1981 is an interesting period in American coinage because the United States Mint were producing enormous quantities of copper-nickel-clad coins for everyday commerce. The Washington quarter was one of the most heavily used denominations in the American monetary system. Quarters were commonly used for vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, public transportation, stores, restaurants, and countless other transactions. Because these coins moved constantly through the economy, many 1981p quarters became scratched, worn, dirty, and damaged. At the same time, large numbers were saved in rolls, bags, collections, or household containers, which means that collectors can still find examples with relatively strong original surfaces. One of the most important facts about the 1981p Washington quarter is that not every 1981p quarter is rare or highly valuable. A common circulated example can usually be found without much difficulty. The fact that a coin is over 40 years old does not automatically make it rare. Coin value depends on several factors, including surviving population, condition, demand, errors, varieties, and whether the coin has been professionally authenticated and graded. This is an important point for anyone examining a 1981p quarter found in pocket change. A normal worn example should not automatically be described as a rare fortune coin. The composition of the 1981p quarter is another important part of its history. The United States Mint moved away from traditional silver quarters for regular circulation beginning in 1965. The 1981p quarter, therefore, consists of a copper-nickel outer layer bonded to a copper core. If you look closely at the edge of a normal 1981p quarter, you can often see the copper-colored center between the lighter outer layers. This is one of the easiest ways to distinguish it from a 90% silver Washington quarter dated 1964 or earlier. Because the 1981p is a clad quarter, its value should not be calculated as though it were an old silver quarter. For collectors, the mint mark is one of the first things to check. The letter P tells you that the coin was struck at Philadelphia. Philadelphia has played an enormous role in American coinage since the earliest years of the United States Mint. The introduction of the P mint mark on circulating Washington quarters in 1980 made Philadelphia quarters much easier to identify. Therefore, the 1981p is part of the early period in which Philadelphia's Washington quarters carried the P mint mark. This historical detail adds collecting interest even though the coin itself was produced in large numbers. When evaluating a 1981p quarter, the first major factor to consider is condition. Coin collectors use a grading system that ranges from heavily worn circulated grades to extremely high mint state grades. A heavily circulated quarter can have smooth areas on Washington's hair, cheek, jaw, and other high points. The reverse eagle can also show substantial loss of detail. Scratches and contact marks may be visible across the open fields. Such a coin is usually worth little beyond its face value, unless it contains an unusual error or variety. An about uncirculated 1981p quarter may look much better. It can retain considerable original detail and luster, but there may be slight friction or wear on the highest portions of Washington's portrait. Collectors often look closely at the cheek, hair, jawline, and other raised areas when determining whether a coin has circulated. On the reverse, the eagle's breast and other high points can provide useful evidence. The difference between a lightly circulated coin and a truly uncirculated coin can sometimes be difficult for beginners to recognize, which is why studying certified examples is helpful. A mint state 1981p quarter has no wear from circulation, although it can still have contact marks and other imperfections. A coin can leave the mint in uncirculated condition. 1972D Washington quarter is a United States quarter-dollar coin struck at the Denver Mint during an important period in American coinage history. It carries a familiar portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the traditional American eagle on the reverse. The D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint, and the coin has a face value of 25 cents. The 1972D belongs to the copper-nickel-clad era of Washington quarters because regular circulating quarters had already changed from the older 90% silver composition to copper-nickel-clad beginning in 1965. For collectors today, the 1972D is generally a common-date Washington quarter in circulated condition, but attractive high-grade pieces, unusual varieties, and genuine mint errors can be much more interesting and potentially more valuable. The coin is especially useful for collectors because it represents the classic Washington quarter design during the early 1970s, when huge numbers of quarters were entering everyday American commerce. The obverse of the 1972D Washington quarter features the famous portrait of George Washington, the first president of the United States. Washington faces toward the left, and his portrait was based on the design by sculptor John Flanagan. Above his head is the word liberty, while the national motto, I in God we trust, appears to the left of the portrait. The date 1972 is located at the bottom of the obverse. The small d mint mark is positioned near the lower right side of Washington's portrait. When identifying this coin, the D is extremely important because it tells you that the quarter was struck at Denver. A 1972 quarter without a mint mark represents a different production issue, while an S-mark example is associated with San Francisco-proof production. The reverse of the 1972 D quarter displays a large American bald eagle with its wings spread. The eagle holds a bundle of arrows in its talons, representing military strength and readiness, while an olive branch appears underneath as a traditional symbol of peace. Around the upper portion of the coin are the words United States of America, followed by E pluribus unum. The denomination quarter dollar appears at the bottom. This reverse design is one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. It remained in use on Washington quarters for many years, making the 1972 D part of a long and historically important design series. The Washington quarter itself has a fascinating history. The first Washington quarters were introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The design became extremely popular and continued after the initial commemorative period. For decades, Americans used Washington quarters in ordinary transactions, and the coin became one of the most familiar denominations in the United States. The 1972 D quarter therefore belongs to a coin series that had already been circulating for approximately 4 decades when this particular issue was struck. One of the most important things to understand about the 1972 D quarter is its composition. Before 1965, regular Washington quarters were made from 90% silver and 10% copper. Rising silver prices and changing economic conditions led the United States Mint to replace the silver composition with copper-nickel-clad coinage for regular circulation. The 1972 D quarter is therefore a clad quarter, not a 90% silver quarter. It has a copper core surrounded by outer layers containing copper and nickel. Looking at the edge of an ordinary 1972 D quarter will often reveal the copper-colored center between the lighter outer layers. Because of this composition, a normal 1972 D quarter should not be valued as a silver coin. This is one of the most common mistakes made by people who discover old quarters. The fact that a coin is from the 1970s does not mean that it contains silver. Regular Washington quarters from 1965 onward were generally made from clad metal, with some special issues in collector products being exceptions. Therefore, the collector value of a 1972 D comes primarily from its condition, errors, varieties, strike quality, and collector demand, rather than from precious metal content. The Denver Mint was responsible for producing enormous quantities of circulating coins during this period. Denver had become one of the most important United States mint facilities, supplying coins for commerce throughout the country. The 1972 D Washington quarter were produced in large numbers, which means that ordinary examples are not considered rare. Many millions entered circulation, and many survived because quarters are durable and were frequently saved in jars, rolls, collections, and household containers. However, surviving population and condition are two different things. A coin can be common overall, but much harder to find in exceptionally high grades. When collectors examine a 1972 D quarter, condition is one of the most important factors. A heavily circulated coin will normally show wear across Washington's hair, cheek, jaw, and other raised areas. The reverse eagle will also show wear, particularly on the highest portions of the feathers and breast. Contact marks, scratches, discoloration, and small dents can appear across the fields. Such a coin is normally a modest collectible and may be worth close to its face value unless it has a significant error or variety. An about uncirculated 1972 D quarter can look considerably better. It may retain much of its original luster and design detail, but show slight friction on the highest areas. The distinction between circulation wear and a weak strike is important. A weakly struck coin can sometimes appear worn even when it is not circulated extensively. Collectors therefore consider the entire coin rather than relying on one design feature. A mint state 1972 D quarter has no actual wear from circulation, although it can still have contact marks and imperfections. Newly struck coins are handled in large quantities at the mint, and coins can hit one another before they are placed into bags or rolls. As a result, finding a truly clean 1972 D quarter can be more difficult than simply finding an uncirculated example. High-grade collectors look for strong luster, sharp details, attractive surfaces, and minimal marks. The strike quality of a 1972 D quarter is another important characteristic. During the striking process, a blank planchet is placed between two dies and struck with tremendous pressure. The quality of the finished coin depends.